Hello and welcome to the fourth ever episode of Full Court Press. Already doing the fourth episode, and hopefully we're at the beginning of something special here. I'm your host, Michael Lyon, alongside co-host Rish and special guest Kunal. Want to introduce yourself, Kunal?
Hey guys, my name is Kunal Chopra. I'm a student at A&M, a huge basketball fan, huge Celtics fan, and that's kind of how my relationship with Michael started. And I've known Rish for a while, and he's always been a huge basketball fan as well.
Really happy to have another Celtics fan on the show. So this should be a fun show today. Say hi, Rish.
Hi, and for the record, I'm not happy that we have two Celtics fans on. I have a feeling there's a lot of going to be biased takes today.
All right, so let's open this up. Not talking about the Celtics. We got some really good stories in the NBA. Lots of stuff happening, pretty crazy. Steph, Warriors. Steph's going to be out for at least a couple of months, probably longer. He injured his hand, and now it looks like the Warriors are going to be a horrible team in the West. People don't think they're going to make the playoffs. In their last game, they even sat Draymond Green and D'Angelo Russell. I barely recognized a player in their starting lineup. I think Willie Cauley-Stein was their best player, or at least their most recognizable player. And they got beat by the Charlotte Hornets, who a lot of people think might be the worst team in the NBA this year. So pretty bad look for the Warriors, borderline tanking. Their season looks like it's going to be pretty rough. What are your guys' impressions about the outlook for the Warriors?
Well, outlook for the Warriors is very bleak. They've lost all their good players. The team that for the past 5 years has been dominating the NBA is now one of the league's worst teams. Bottom three, I would say they're going to be in contention for the number one overall pick next year.
Yeah, just agreeing with Rish. Actually, Draymond's injured and can't really grip a basketball, and I heard D'Angelo also has an injury, so we'll see what they do. I know they have a lot of payroll that they're going to try and cut. They got a lot of young guys that they're going to try and develop, but they'll definitely be in contention for the number one pick.
Pretty crazy for a team that, well, obviously they've been to like 5 straight NBA finals, and then even going into this year, Steph and Draymond were talking about how they liked being under the radar and sneaky like championship contender still. But all that's pretty much out the window at this point, and they'll be lucky if they could make the playoffs, and that probably not going to occur depending on when Steph gets back. Let's also talk about the Suns, who are surprisingly kind of good. They're only losses this year are a 1-point overtime loss to Denver and a 1-point loss to Utah. Two good, solid, competing teams in the West. They've crushed the Clippers this year, who a lot of people have winning the championship. Devin Booker looks pretty good. Still really early in the year, but are these guys for real or what?
Well, I think it's a little too early to say. I mean, after all, it's only been 4 to 5 games for each team, but it's looking promising. I think we've all seen that the Suns have a lot of talent over the past few years. They've had Devin Booker for now 4 years. They've had DeAndre Ayton, who's I guess is suspended. Kelly Oubre last year was a pretty good pick for them, and then they look promising. But ultimately, I don't really buy into the Suns. I think that there's too much coaching turmoil in that organization, and the organization's too disorganized to be any real contenders for the next couple of years.
Only a few games in, the Suns have showed a lot of promise that in the past couple of years, and now they're finally delivering on it. They've had a lot of coaching changes, but I think Monty Williams he's able to utilize the talent. At first, they were just a talented team that really didn't know how to put it together, but now they're able to put it together. I think the pickup of Ricky Rubio was quite good, and it's really stabilized the team, as well as Aaron Baines. He's given them a lot of toughness inside. Obviously, they don't have Ayton, but he should be back in like the next 20 games or so, and we'll see how they do. But they have a lot of talent, and now they know how to use it, so great job on them.
Yeah, I'm happy for Aaron Baines, the former Celtics player. Ultimately, though, this just really has the feel of something that's going to crash and burn within like sooner rather than later too. They don't have they were projected to finish as a bottom team in the West for a reason. They just don't have the talent that other teams have in the West. And since it's already so crowded, and teams like the Timberwolves are overperforming as well, Dallas looks like it's going to be more of a threat than people anticipated at the beginning. So in like a super crowded competitive conference without that much talent, and yeah, they've looked good, but they haven't looked like convincingly dominant, and such a small sample size too. I'm going to take this team to like fall apart pretty quick. Moving on to the San Antonio Spurs. Speaking of teams that are overperforming in the West, the Spurs have a pretty good record, off to a 4-1 start, above where people would have pegged them, I think, so far. Does that have to do with schedule being kind of easy, or just random variance at the beginning of the season? Or are DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge going to be pretty good playing in Pop's system this year?
Last year before the season started, their I think number one pick from 2016, DeJounte Murray, got injured. But this year he's come back and he's looked pretty good. I think he's averaging like 19 points. His shot's still broken, but he's given them a lot of good defense. And then, of course, they have the carryover of Derek White, who showed a lot of promise and intangibles in last year's playoff series. He's looked good, and I think they're a young team. Obviously, they've got those two guys, DeMar and LaMarcus, but they've got a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I agree with the bright future ahead part, but the thing is, it's only been 5 games, so it's very hard to tell if they've overperformed, really. They lost to the Clippers. That was their one loss, but they did beat the Blazers, Wizards, and I guess the Warriors, although the Warriors have been pretty bad this year. So, in terms of whether or not they're overperforming, I think it's ultimately too early to tell whether teams like the San Antonio or Phoenix or Minnesota are overperforming and teams like the Rockets are underperforming. I think in general, I haven't seen anything from them that tells me to change my opinion of whether they're a borderline playoff team. I had them 9th this year, but I think I could see them in the playoffs just as easily. I had the Mavericks in at 8, but it could just as easily be San Antonio. So, nothing I've seen so far changes my opinion of that.
Yeah, you know what? They're 4-1, and I think the team sitting in 10th place right now is 3-2. So I don't think it really matters. Their personnel, good for them for getting DeJounte Murray back, but it's probably too early to tell if that's helping to a big extent right now. I think time will tell on that. I'm pretty excited to talk about how the Boston Celtics are doing this year, because we have somebody now with me in the Celtics making a title run. Pretty excited. We're off to a really good start this year. We had a really dominant win over Milwaukee, which was a game that I love to watch. It had that classic comeback feel that we had a lot during the 2017 year when Gordon Hayward got hurt originally, and we got off to that hot 16-2 start. And that was the same year that we made it to the Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, playing without Kyrie Irving or Gordon Hayward, and we made that awesome playoff run. This was a 19-point comeback against the Bulls. We never gave up. We played good defense the whole time. Kemba scored 30 plus, and then the next game after that comeback, Jason Tatum hits a game winner against the Knicks. Love everything about that. I love that you see Kemba Walker celebrating. There's a game very similar last year against the Orlando Magic where Kyrie got upset about a very similar end of game situation, and this year you don't get any drama about that. You get you see pure joy in Kemba Walker's face when he sees Tatum hit that game winner. He's happy for him. He's throughout the season he's telling Jason Tatum, shoot more shots. As a Celtics fan, that team chemistry is just so nice. So fun to root for, and I think we have a lot of that spark in us. We have a really good. We gave up Al Horford to Philadelphia, but in general, we have a really good track record against them the last few years. And we just had a pretty big comeback win against Milwaukee. They lost some key pieces in Mirotic and Brogdon. I'm not too scared of anybody in the East right now, and I'm really happy about how the Celtics are doing.
Yeah, I'm a noted Celtics fan, but just removing my green-colored glasses for a second, the first half of this entire season has been a little worrisome. I know we've fallen back, and the shooting's been subpar in the first half, but we made good runs. We fixed our issues in the second half, so we'll see how that goes. But I think we're very promising. The rookies are doing great. Grant Williams he's so far he's been a stud. He reminds me a lot of Draymond. I know that that's a term that people throw around, someone who passes and defends well. But I genuinely do see him as maybe a Draymond type of player. As far as the other rookies go, they haven't been as good as him. For instance, Carson Edwards, he's been a little shaky, but it's still extremely promising. We traded out, I guess, just a lot of turmoil and talent for continuity, and I think we're reaping the benefit right now.
Yeah, so the Celtics have played 3 quality opponents so far in the Sixers, the Raptors, and the Bucks. Notably, they did play the Bucks at home, so, I mean, the Celtics won that as expected. And to be fair, I really think that the Celtics have looked better this season. The chemistry is a lot better than it was last year. I think the biggest reason is Kemba instead of Kyrie. But again, that was to be expected. Like, I think everybody knew going into the season that the Celtics' chemistry would be better than it was last year. Everyone's coming back for another year, and Kemba Walker wasn't as much of a locker room issue as Kyrie clearly was. So I think I'm gonna pump the brakes on the whole like Celtics to win the championship thing, because at the end of the day, they lost to the Sixers. I mean, the Sixers were at home, so they were kind of expected to win that game, and they did. But like, again, it's been 5 games. And they played 2 games against the Knicks, and then their 3 opponents. But I will say that they have looked better. But I think at the end it'll still be second round playoff exit to either the Spurs or the Bucks, Sixers or the Bucks. Sorry. Or if they beat one, I think they'll just lose to the other in conference finals. I don't see a championship run here personally, because I think that. I don't see a championship path for any team in the East, really, because I think the Clippers and the Lakers are the 2 best teams in the NBA, and I think they'll remain the 2 best teams in the NBA.
I'm just saying I like the energy that we're playing with. I like the feel of this team a lot more. We were expected to lose to Milwaukee, 3.5-point underdogs, even though we were at home. We were playing without Jaylen Brown in that game, too. So that was a pretty big win.
Proves that the contract's worthless if you can beat Milwaukee without Jaylen Brown.
I don't think that's quite true.
I loved the Jaylen Brown contract. I thought they were paying for future, and honestly, they had nowhere else to put that money. They were over the cap space, so they figured why not use it on a talented player instead of letting him go and having that money just wash away with him. I think with Philadelphia, that first game, we were down and we shot poorly, and everybody was in foul trouble. I'm not making excuses. I still think that Philadelphia is an extremely talented team, but we were still able to keep the score within 4 with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Philly doesn't really scare me because they don't have a closer like Jimmy Butler. Joel Embiid is injury prone, and Ben Simmons still can't shoot. Al Horford, a great player. Contract that he got, 4-year, 109. Within 2 years, I think that might be one of the worst contracts in the NBA. Of course, Al's a great player, and I think he'll age wonderfully, but I just don't know if he can continue to guard that many players. And as for Milwaukee, the losses of Brogdon are going to show up quite a bit in the playoffs. They used the money that they were going to give to Brogdon and instead gave it to Bledsoe, which I thought was a horrible decision. In my mind, Bledsoe is one of the worst players in the NBA. I really don't know how he has a starting job. I know he was a first team all defender, but I think there are quite a few guards that are better than him, both offensively and defensively.
I mean, the Sixers are the only undefeated team in the NBA still, and they have won close games like against the Trailblazers a couple nights ago. So I don't really understand like the whole like closer argument, because and because like it's not really like, okay, like closing is important, but like you can do that as a team through a system. And I think that's also like the Spurs did that all the time. The Spurs never relied on one player during their like great run of 20 years, but they relied on a continuous system to win games. And I think the Sixers can do the same thing just as easily with a really talented roster. I'm more like skeptical about Milwaukee, I guess, because the loss of Malcolm Brogdon is huge. But again, they didn't have him in the playoffs last year for a large portion of it, and they did seem to be doing fine. They did beat the Celtics in 5 games, although a completely different Celtics team with Kyrie. And I think the loss of Malcolm Brogdon really showed itself in the Toronto series. But again, Toronto is way different now. And I don't think the Celtics now were better than Toronto was last year. So I'm not quite sure like if the loss is enough to inhibit them from like being unable to beat the Celtics in the upcoming playoffs, because both teams are going to make the playoffs.
I think the closer argument for the Sixers is a decent one. Their game winner over the Trailblazers was made by Furkman Korkmaz. He doesn't even start for them. He comes off their bench. He made a three-pointer. They don't have great three-point shooting on that team. They don't have a single great three-point shooter on that entire team. So in big situations in the playoffs, I'll take Kemba and Jason Tatum over Furkman and Korkmaz any day of the week. And I think because of their lack of shooting, I think that's a pretty fair point. I mean, who's going to be shooting their shots at the end of the game? Not Joel Embiid. Not maybe Tobias Harris. He's not great. Ben Simmons can't shoot. I'm not that scared of Philly, and I'm optimistic about the Celtics. Any last points about the Celtics?
I just want to say it is 5 games in, so it's very dangerous to make determinations on how the season will go after only 5 games. I've seen nothing so far that leads me to change my prediction. I still think the Sixers and the Bucks are better, but time will tell, I guess.
All right, I'm just saying I want Furkman and Korkmaz to keep shooting those shots at the end of the game, because I'll be pretty happy against them in the playoffs if he does.
Yeah, that shot was generated by a kick out by Ben Simmons, I believe. But it's not like the shot was generated. It wasn't a bad shot by any means, and he was on the field probably for his 3-point shooting. Maybe he was a good 3-point shooter in practice. I don't know. We don't know enough about him, but the point is if a shot can be generated by someone who's a decent 3-point shooter with a wide open look or close to a wide open look can make a 3 at the end of a game. I'm not too concerned about the whole clutch argument for this team moving forward. I picked the Bucks to get out of the East anyway, but I think the Sixers are just as talented and have a decent chance too. I think Boston's got a chance. I'm not saying they've got no chance to win anything, because they are a talented team and they've got a great coach. But it's not like they're set right now to win the East and I'm feeling really confident because we've played 5 games and we've won 4 of them, and okay, but it's been 5 games and the regular season doesn't matter, as evidenced by the past 5 years.
So we've talked about a couple issues that the Sixers have, but one thing that I think is overlooked and is probably their biggest is probably coaching. Brett Brown really doesn't adjust too much. I know he made a couple of key adjustments during the Raptors series and he made it close, but I think if you had to put the Sixers against the Celtics, I think with the Sixers' talent and defense, I think it would get dwarfed by the matchup between Brett Brown and Brad Stevens. I think Brad Stevens blows Brett Brown out of the water when it comes to adjustments, and I think that plays a huge deal in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I don't think we should be locks to win the East or something. I'm just saying I feel pretty good rooting for them right now. I think we're as good a shot as anybody. Moving on to the West moving over to the West Coast, talking about the LA Lakers, who had a pretty nice win against the Dallas Mavericks recently. LeBron had a 30-point triple-double, as did Luka Doncic. So that was a really good battle between the two teams. Luka looked like he was hurting a little bit towards the end of that game, but LeBron drove and had the assist to Danny Green for the game-tying 3 at the buzzer, and then they took care of business in the overtime. It was a really fun game to watch. The Lakers look like they're playing with energy, though. LeBron looks a lot better than he did the first couple of games of the season. The Lakers look really energized, and their talent is becoming pretty obvious as they've gotten off to a pretty hot start. Beating a good team like Dallas, pretty good sign for them. That even though their chemistry might not be there yet, the talent is just a lot, and it's going to clearly get them a lot of wins this year.
Yeah, regarding the Lakers for the regular season, there are only 2 stories. The Lakers' health and what seed they end up as. I think that everything else in the regular season with the Lakers and the Clippers, to be honest, are just okay, they're playing regular season games, meaningless games. We know they're going to finish very well. We know they're making the playoffs. So the real question is, how is LeBron doing at the end of the regular season? How is Anthony Davis doing at the end of the regular season? And what seed are they? Because both me and Michael picked the Rockets to win the West this year, and we both had the Clippers and Lakers as second and third, which is really interesting because that means one of them will knock each other out potentially in the second round. So seeding is a very important thing to keep in mind at the moment. But regarding the game a couple nights ago, I think that the real story is the Mavericks. I think Luka Doncic has shown quite a bit of improvement for his rookie season. And that's saying a lot because he was pretty good his rookie season. And I'm feeling pretty good about the Mavericks pick to make the playoffs. I think that Rick Carlisle has been an underrated coach for a very long time. And this year he's got the talent to prove how good of a coach he is. And I think the Mavericks will make the playoffs this year, and I'm feeling pretty good about my pick.
As a Celtics fan, I'll never say anything good about the Lakers, but they have a lot of talent, of course. I know there's some injury concern, but ever since that first game, it seems like they have something good going on. I think the pickup of Danny Green was a good move just because they were left scrambling after Kawhi left them. So I think they've got a good thing going on. And I think they'll make it out of the East when it comes down to the playoff matchup between the Clippers and the Lakers. That's who I have in the conference finals. I think the duo of Anthony Davis and LeBron James is better than Paul George and Kawhi. But we'll see. But they do have a good thing going on, and I am impressed.
I like what you're saying, Rish, about the Mavericks getting off to a nice start. I see them making the playoffs too now, replacing the Warriors. I'm not going to have the Warriors in my playoff predictions anymore. Dallas can fit right in there. I'm thinking about how Minnesota might want to creep in there too. But we'll talk about Minnesota later. Super promising start for the Mavericks, and Lakers playing well. But I kind of agree with you that they'll probably have their ups and downs throughout the regular season, and a lot weighs on how they look going into the playoffs. Talking about the Rockets too, who I think have had a pretty interesting start to the season. James Harden is scoring in the mid-30s in terms of points per game again, but he's doing it shooting a horrible percentage from three. I think it's like below 20%. He's just had a lot of games where he's shooting like his recent game, I think he was 2 for 14 from three. He's been like 1 for 18, and like these are just ridiculously high volume attempts while making like 1 or 2. He had that one good 59-point game against Washington, but even that being his great game, he was just 6 for 14 from three, which is good for high volume, but that was his best game, and the other games are just like percentages that we've like never seen so bad before. Russell Westbrook seems to be playing pretty well, averaging near triple-double yet again. So it looks like he's still being able to produce for that team, and they're playing well enough. Like I think they're 3-2 right now, but their play isn't alarmingly bad or anything. It's just Harden's 3-point percentage. If he keeps this up, it's hard to imagine them having much long-term success in the Western Conference. And I don't know if that's play style. Is that like trying to fit in Russell Westbrook? Is he like forcing his own shot more? I know they're playing the same type of iso ball, or they've been kind of sticking to that for Harden and just mixing in Westbrook as well. I think they've been trying to stagger their minutes pretty good as well. So I don't know if Harden's just trying to overcompensate or if he's just simply struggling to shoot the ball and it'll adjust with variance. But it's pretty weird that he's averaging points in the mid-30s and his field goal percentage is right there in the mid-30s as well, a large part because of these three-point struggles.
Yeah, so my assessment of the Rockets is there are a couple of good things and a couple of bad things, but I think the bad things outweigh the good things so far. Well, we talk about James Harden's field goal percentage and free throw and field 3-point percentage, but like it's been 5 games, it'll probably be fine. I'm not too worried about James Harden. He's proven time and time again that he can score at a good clip for the entirety of his career. I'm not too worried about him after 5 games. The offensive encouragement I see is the pace. I think when Russell Westbrook has the ball, the Rockets are playing with a quicker pace, and I like that more. I think we played with the slowest pace in the NBA over the past 2 years, largely due to ISO ball, and I think with Russell Westbrook, we're getting a lot more transition offense. Now, the negative is the defense. Like, I don't understand if the Rockets are even, like, even going back on defense anymore. They gave up 159 points to the Wizards and 159 to 158. That was pretty terrible. I mean, there's no defense getting played by the Rockets right now. The Nets scored 123, and they had like 50% from the field and almost 60% from three, if I'm not mistaken. So like, there is no defense getting played right now. And I don't know if that's like a regular season thing and they'll figure it out. But the Rockets have typically been a great regular season team, so it's kind of worrying, I guess, because they like to try during the regular season. So I don't know. Overall, kind of worrying, although I'm not too concerned about the offense. I'm definitely more concerned about the defense.
Yeah, I'm with Rish on this. James Harden's shooting is worrisome, but I think he'll get out of his funk. The defense is especially concerning, mainly because they let their defensive coach go. I think he retired. So this defensive performance over the past 5 games, I don't think it's an anomaly. I think it's here to stay. And if so, I think they need to figure out how to fix it, either by scoring more points or just defending better. That would help a lot.
Their defense is a pretty big concern. I completely agree with that. They shouldn't be allowing 158 points to a team like Washington under any circumstance, and they shouldn't be allowing 123 to the Nets. There's like back-to-back games. Yeah, I think it's a big red flag, and it matches up with the story of them having problems with their coaching staff on defense. So yeah, that's definitely a big concern for them. Their offensive system, I think they can keep trusting it. I think it's gotten them a lot of success so far, although it puts a lot of pressure on Harden, and with him not having the best playoff performances historically, that might be their downfall. But maybe Russell Westbrook can help with that this year. I know talking about Harden's performance in the playoffs is a little bit of a controversial subject. Maybe you want to touch in on that, Rish. But basically, there's been a lot of clutch moments where people feel like he hasn't performed as well as he could have, or as well as they would expect him to, being the best ISO scorer, and a lot of people think the best individual offensive player in the league right now. He's had his shortcomings in the playoffs.
I just think it's really tough to measure Harden's performance in the playoffs over the past 5 years when the team he's lost to was like the best team of all time or the second best team of all time behind the Bulls. Like, okay, the Warriors have lost the championship twice over the past 5 years. Okay, the first time was a 3-1 epic collapse to LeBron. Draymond got suspended. Andrew Bogut got hurt. So there's like a lot of issues with that. And then the second time they lost, they didn't have Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry was pretty much doing it by himself. And that team was horribly injured the entire time, and that led to the complete tear down of the Warriors as we've known it. So the only team that's really come close to beating a fully loaded, fully healthy Golden State team was the Rockets, who took them to a Game 7. And I don't really understand the whole like Harden is a choker in the playoffs when, yeah, okay, his points per game is down. That's to be expected, though. His field goal percentage is down. That's also to be expected because, like, at the end of the day, you're playing against better defenses on a night and out basis. You're playing a 7-game series, so that's more time for the opponent to adjust to you. And when you're the sole focal point of an offense, like you were in 2017 when you had that epic collapse against the Spurs, it does wear on you because your usage rate is through the roof. I think it happened to Russell Westbrook too a little earlier because he had the highest usage rate that year, and it happened against the Rockets as it turns out. And then it happened to Harden against the Spurs because you're putting so much effort into offense and your defense suffers as a result of that, and you just get tired playing that much offense and having the ball in your hand the whole time. So I'm not quite sure like where this criticism from Harden is coming from. I think it's just like people are really fascinated with the idea of hitting a clutch shot to win a game. But to be fair, like that's really like subjective, and like I don't really understand like what's clutch, what's not. And people like demean a clutch shot based on situation. Like, regular season clutch shots don't matter, but postseason clutch shots matter more because like the stakes are higher. And I get that, but at the same time, it's still a very similar shot against better defenses. So like you're bound to you're bound to make less of them in the playoffs. And I don't know. I think it's a little bit overstated. He has been a little bit worse in the playoffs, but not to the point where I would call him a choker or like unclutch or anything like that.
I think the problem is, I actually agree with you that the Rockets have been the best threat to the fully loaded Warriors dynasty over the last few years. It says a lot to how good their offensive system is. But people's concerns about James Harden, it's more than the Warriors. Talking about things like Game 6 against the Spurs a few years back. I know they've ran into the Warriors a lot recently. There's just a lot of times at the end of games, I don't know, the great players at some point just have to go off and exceed expectations. LeBron doesn't play any worse in the playoffs. He averages 28 points per game on his career compared to 27 in the regular season on 49% shooting compared to 50% shooting in the regular season. So I don't think it's true that you have to play worse in the playoffs. If you're a superstar, sometimes you just have to be that good. And winning MVP, scoring 36 points per game, some of those things are just going to start to be expected of him if he wants to live up to expectations.
Yeah, I get that, but again, let's look at last year's playoff series against the Rockets, or with the Rockets and the Warriors. Through 4 games, Harden had identical scoring stats to Kevin Durant. And people regard Kevin Durant as the best player in the world. I know I do. And through 4 games, they had the same stats. And then Kevin Durant got hurt, so obviously Harden's stats would be a little bit better at the end of the season, regular end of the series. But again, Harden had the same scoring stats as Kevin Durant, more assists, about the same number of rebounds, and it's is that bad? Is that considered bad? Harden was considered a major choker after they lost in 6 games, and he had good stats. I mean, he played well. I don't think he played worse than he did in the regular season, or worse against the Warriors than he would against the Jazz, the previous series where he had I know there was a game against the Jazz where he went 3 of 18 and 0 of 15 through 3 quarters. That kind of stuff just happens. But he didn't play worse against the Warriors when the stakes were higher than against the Jazz when the stakes were a little lower in the first round of the playoffs. Would you agree that the stakes get higher as the playoffs move forward, right? His play doesn't dip or increase based on the level of pressure, right? It's just how it goes. When you play for a team that shoots so many threes, there's a large variance in the way that you shoot, especially in the playoffs with a smaller sample size. And that's the thing I really want to focus on when it comes to the Rockets in the playoffs. Not the performance of James Harden or the performance of Chris Paul or Russell Westbrook in the playoffs or anything like that. It's about you need to change the system going into the playoffs. When you shoot a lot of threes, the regular season has a large sample size, so it evens out and you become the best offense in the league or the second best offense in the league, like they have been over the past 2 years. But when you go in the playoffs, there's a smaller sample size, so you need to adjust. Shooting the same amount of threes won't work because there's a large variance, and you can just lose a 3 or 4 games by shooting bad from 3. And I think we're too reliant on the 3, and we need to change up the style in the playoffs. Not necessarily the play of James Harden and Russell Westbrook. That's not the reason the Rockets suck in the playoffs, or suck comparatively, I guess.
Yeah, during the regular season, their reliance on the 3-point shot and free throws is staggering. Obviously, during the playoffs, you won't get the same foul calls that you do during the regular season, so you will have to change it up. You'll have to start using the mid-range, but that's just something that they haven't gone to. I think with the addition of Russell Westbrook, I think it'll open up the court more in that regard. I thought that would be the case with Chris Paul coming over. I know he shot the mid-range shot during the playoffs, and he had quite a bit of success, but of course he got injured. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully James Harden can try and change up his game a little bit so that he's not overly reliant on the 3-pointer and the free throws.
But that's the thing, right? Before D'Antoni got there, he was shooting mid-range shots. He's an elite mid-range shooter. He's being told to take threes and layups because that's the style of the Rockets. It's not like James Harden can't do any of the things you're talking about, like mid-range shots or not going for free throws. He's being told to do this stuff because it's the most efficient way to play basketball, according to the Rockets, right? So he's doing what he's told essentially. He's not doing anything that's not what D'Antoni is telling him to do either.
You think they should change their system for the playoffs? I would hold back on that a little bit. I mean, the NBA is a best of 7 game series, so one bad shooting night shouldn't derail the whole series for you. If it's something that works all season and gets you to be the best team all season, I say you just roll with it and hope it makes you the best team in the playoffs too. If you go cold from 3, you're competing. They're not trying to. They're probably trying to be hot from three. I don't think it's all like luck whether these shots go in. I think they would like to think that even playing through this system where they shoot a lot of threes, they can be consistent enough to the point where it's not going to prevent them from winning a best-of-7 series.
Yeah, I kind of agree with some of that, but the thing is, like, okay, in the regular season when you shoot 43s a game, 30 layups or assists, dunks a game, and 2 mid-range shots a game, that works because over an 82-game stretch, having a few 5-game losing streaks when you're not shooting well from 3 is okay because there's 82 games, and you can have a couple 5-game losing streaks, and you'll be fine. But in the playoffs, you have one 5-game losing streak or 1, 2, or 3 game stretch where you can't make threes. You're down, you lose 3 games in a row, and that's like there's a big difference between being up 3-0 or up 2-1 or 1-2 than being down 3-0 because of having bad shooting nights. I'm not saying completely change the style, right? I'm just saying instead of going from 40 threes and 30 layups and 2 mid-range shots, how about like 30 threes, some more drives or something like that, and then like 10 mid-range shots a game, or like so just to show some variety of offense rather than just, okay, we're gonna have James Harden or Russell Westbrook dribble at the top, drive, either go for a Clint Capella for the dunk, shoot for an open 3, or just shoot the 3 yourself. There's like a very limited way the Rockets play their offense through 3 zones: in the low post, I guess if you want to consider layups the low post, and the 3-point line, the free throw line. 3-point line and the free throw line, right? If you can expand that to like some mid-range shots too, like high block sort of stuff, because we know James Harden can do it because he's done it before. I think that would just be a more variety on offense. So it'd be less for teams to plan for rather than just, okay, we didn't defend the 3 well this game. We can change that up through different means because we know they're going to do the same thing on offense every night. Like, we can change stuff up too because we have the ability to change stuff up.
I think they just might be a worse team if they try to change their identity like that. And I think at some point people just want to see, like, you're kind of attributing like these losing, like 2-3 game losing streaks or like poor performance in the playoffs to like their system not being able to handle that type of variance when you shoot a lot of threes. But the person taking the highest volume of those shots is Harden. And I think some people just want to see, like, you're the superstar, like, make this one of the good nights because you're that good. Make the variance in your favor because you can control it night in and night out. And people just want to see that from Harden. I think their system proves that it works throughout the year. And I think they just have to step up in the playoffs. And that's what it's going to come down to. They've had chances. Yeah, we need to move on. Let's talk about the emergence of Brandon Ingram on the Pelicans. The Pelicans have had a pretty awful start to the season. And I think below where most people thought they would be. Not that they had the highest expectations, but they've been losing a lot of games. Their bright spot has been Brandon Ingram. People had concerns about him because of his blood clotting issues, and you don't know what's going on with that, mixed with his questionable development compared to expectations as a number 2 pick in the first place. Not exactly how he wanted his career to go in LA, but he's been playing really, really well to start the year for New Orleans.
Yeah, Ingram's development has been one of the few bright spots on the Pelicans. He showed this potential last year. I think when LeBron was off the court, he averaged 31 points on like a 55% true shooting percentage per 36 minutes. It's just that his development was capped out whenever he was with LeBron. So I think this trade was probably the best thing for him, and he's really showing what he's capable of doing. I think he'll get a max, a 4 or 5 year deal from whichever team. It'll probably be from the Pelicans, but he's really shown a lot this year.
Yeah, I agree. The Pelicans are 1-5, but I don't think that's because of Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram's been playing very well, and he's the reason they're in a lot of those games. I kind of agree. When Zion Williamson comes back, it's going to be a very interesting year for the Pelicans. They've got a bunch of young pieces. Alvin Gentry, I think, is a decent coach. So we'll see. I think the Pelicans will be a very fun team to watch this upcoming season.
Yeah, kind of interesting with Zion. I feel good for Brandon Ingram for his career, but I don't think the Pelicans are going to make much noise. A team that I'm a little more optimistic about is the Minnesota Timberwolves. who are 4-1, got off to a 3-0 start, and then their only loss was that game against the Sixers where Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns started fighting, which was pretty cool to see. But Karl Anthony Towns has been playing really, really well, and they actually won a game without him recently. So I think they look pretty good. I think Karl Anthony Towns is trying to emerge, like break through and establish himself as a superstar in this league, like the kind of player that can carry a team to the playoffs by himself. They're in the picture now. I know it's super early and all the teams in the West are so close, but pretty good for Minnesota so far. Do you guys think they can keep it up?
I don't think they'll keep it up. I don't really watch too much of Timberwolves games, but obviously Karl Anthony Towns is doing good. He's in the MVP conversation. Wiggins has been better, but he's still nowhere near living up to his contract. I know Robert Covington's always been a great defender, and then they drafted Jarrett Culver, who I was a huge fan of in this year's draft. I don't think it's sustainable, but I do think they're building for the future, and it does look bright.
Yeah, I also don't have the Timberwolves making a ton of noise, but that's less because of the Timberwolves and more on how stacked the West is this year. Like, we look at the 8 teams that are currently in the playoffs, right? And you have Minnesota, the Lakers, the Spurs, the Jazz, the Nuggets, the Suns, the Clippers, and the Rockets. And all those teams are all very talented. And then you look at the teams that aren't in the playoffs, and you see Portland, a team that's made the playoffs the past couple of years. Dallas, OKC's got Chris Paul. Golden State has Steph Curry. New Orleans is immensely talented, immensely young, and so is Sacramento. Memphis, by the way, also in there. Ja Morant, very good, 18-5 through 5 games, looking pretty good, I'd say. Also, so every team in the West has been so good, and the reality is only 8 teams make it, and I don't think the Timberwolves can make the cut there. I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is that great. I was really high on Andrew Wiggins going into the draft. I thought he'd be extremely good. Fortunately, I was proven wrong. But I think he's still good enough, and I think that team is good enough to make the playoffs. But again, in a stacked Western Conference, it becomes tough because every team's got talent in the West.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because if I keep my 8 and then like switching Golden State for Dallas, who we talked about earlier, it's hard to see who Minnesota would push out of that conversation. It seems like all of those teams would make like serious playoff pushes. I don't know if Minnesota is talented or deep enough to compete with those teams, but they do look really good. I get a little bit of the feeling that I got with the Suns that like, yeah, it looks pretty nice so far, but it's so early. Like, odds are they settle back to where people expected them to be. I see a little bit more hope with Minnesota than I did with Phoenix, and we'll see where they end up. I think it's pretty interesting. If Karl Anthony Towns keeps playing at this level, I'd give him a shot. They definitely have a shot. There's a few more things to wrap up here. We got Pascal Siakam playing really well, even though Toronto might not be as much of a story this year. With Kawhi being gone, they don't really have the same championship aspirations. Pascal Siakam seems to be taking another step in the right direction. Really looking like he's earning that contract they just signed him to. I think he's averaging like 28 and 10 right now. So really, really good sign from the young player that he could be taking another step up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was actually one of the skeptics in the Pascal Siakam trade, and in general, I try not to make assumptions too early in the regular season, but so far, from what I've seen from Pascal Siakam, it looks extremely good. So good, coupled with his playoff performance from last year. So good, in fact, that I think that in 2 or 3 years, that contract that Pascal Siakam signed is going to be one of the best contracts in the NBA for a team, I guess. I think he'll be underpaid. I think he's already extremely good, averaging 28 points a game, right? Insane, right? And I think the Raptors are going to make some noise in the playoffs. They might not win the East again. They're definitely not going to win the championship, but they'll make some noise. And I think they'll be one of those solid playoff contenders.
Yeah, I was a little skeptical about that contract as well. Every year he's added something new. 2 years ago, he was a great defender. Last year, he added a lot of cutting, and he was great just cutting across the court and getting easy baskets. This year, he's added dribbling, and he's started creating his own shot. I think he's shooting like 38%, maybe even higher than that. So this is a guy who started playing basketball when he was like 17, and to see the growth is it's quite mind-boggling, honestly. Yeah, he's shooting 49% from the field, and he's averaging 26 points to go along with 3.5 assists. I think the Raptors are going to surprise some people this year. Obviously, whenever they lost Kawhi, a lot of people thought that they would have a fire sale and trade away Lowry and Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, but I think that they can make some serious noise in the playoffs with Siakam's growth. So I'm excited to see what he does in the future. I definitely do see some top 5 MVP finishes for him, and just really excited to see what he does.
Last thing we'll touch on is the Miami Heat, who we both of us had the Heat in our playoff predictions before the season, and they don't look drastically different from, I think, what we would have expected, except for Kendrick Nunn, the rookie, scoring a lot. He's playing really well for them. Maybe a little bit of an unexpected contributor. Think that amounts to anything? Maybe reevaluate what your original opinion was for the Heat. I think for me, it doesn't really change what I think about them. He may be filling in some nice stats, but I don't think it's that much of a level above the replacement that the Heat might have for him. I think he might be a nice player, but not good enough to stack up with the other point guards in the league, not the other contending point guards for the league. So it's a nice story, maybe some hope for them for the long-term future, but I don't think it changes their trajectory on the season. Probably a first or second round, probably a first round exit in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Heat are a team that have surprised me. I thought they would finish like 6th or 7th. I think right now they're first. Obviously, it's 5 games in. Or second. They're second.
Sixers are undefeated, bro.
Okay, yeah, the Sixers are undefeated. That's right. So they're the second seed. They have 1 loss. Everybody was talking about Tyler Hero after his summer league performance, and he deserves it. He was great. I thought he was the steal of the draft. But Kendrick Nunn has been someone who has sort of come out of the shadows. He was with the Warriors last year. He was on their G League team. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses. He's averaging like 22 points. He's showing off hops, and he's been able to create his own shot at times. Obviously, with the addition of Jimmy Butler, he's going to be the top dog. But we'll see how those other guys develop. I know they got Justice Winslow, who's a great young player. Bam Adebayo. I think he played with over summer with Team USA. He showed him quite a bit. Great defender, and I know during practice he showed off some handles and he was able to create his own shots. So we'll see how that team progresses, but they've got a great future, and then they've got Jimmy Butler right now. So along with Eric Spoelstra, who I think is one of the top coaches, but they've got a great developmental program, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I agree. The Heat are an extremely well-run program with a great GM/president of basketball operations, Pat Riley. They've got Eric Spoelstra, they've got Jimmy Butler, and they've got some good rookies with a lot of promise that they're developing. Seems to be very well. So I'm excited to see what the Miami team holds for the future, maybe in the next 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 years. But until then, I agree with Michael. First round playoff exit.
All right. That about wraps it up. It's been a lot of fun. We got some good opinions out there. So thanks, Kunal, for coming on the show. Rish, as always, it's been fun. And thanks for listening.
Yep, it's been a great time. Kunal, I'm sure we'll be seeing you on the podcast in the future.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. Hope to be back soon.
So that wraps up episode 4 of Full Court Press.